LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to LiberalViewer PBS Democratic Debate Live Clip Roundup. Thanks for joining me. I picked out 10 clips from last night's South Carolina debate. The best 10 clips, I think, which should be a really informative show for you all this morning. For those of you who attended what turned out to be the rehearsal in the middle of the night last night, I apologize. For some reason, both the archive of the live stream and also my copy that I record to my hard drive got all messed up with the audio and video out of sync and some gaps, and so I just decided to rebroadcast it. I'm actually a little more awake. I had oral surgery yesterday, but I'm feeling okay and not too swollen, so I'm going to go ahead and give you the best 10 clips from last night's debate. I thought overall it was a very close debate. I'll give my opinion along the way as to why I think Bernie Sanders did a little bit of a better job, and there's some interesting new conflicts and new evolution of the debates, topics that I've covered in the last couple debates. Also, if you're watching this as a recorded show, I'll put time indexes down in the video description where I've described all 10 of the clips I'm showing, and you can skip between them and decide which ones you want to watch if you don't want to watch them all. The first clip I'm going to show is, and these clips are in chronological order, from the beginning of the debate to the end of the debate. So the first clip is the earliest one from the debate, about 10 or 15 minutes into the debate, where Judy Woodruff asked Hillary Clinton why she lost the woman's vote in New Hampshire. If she's running to be the first woman president, why isn't she winning the female demographic? And it's even worse with younger women. I think she lost all women in New Hampshire, something like 55-45. But it was for under 30 women, it was like 85-15. She lost them by like 70 points. And here's Hillary Clinton trying to explain why she's losing women, and then also explaining why she was so supportive of Madeline Albright's comment that women who don't help other women have a special place in hell, over in this clip.
Secretary Clinton, your campaign, you and your campaign have made a clear appeal to women voters. You've talked repeatedly about the fact we know you would be, if elected, the first woman president. But in New Hampshire, 55% of the women voters supported and voted for Senator Sanders. What are women missing about you?
Well, first, Judy, I have spent my entire adult life working toward making sure that women are empowered to make their own choices, even if that choice is not to vote for me. I believe that it's most important that we unleash the full potential of women and girls in our society. And I feel very strongly that I have an agenda, I have a record that really does respond to a lot of the specific needs that the women in our country face. So I'm going to keep making that case. I'm going to keep making sure that everything I've done, everything that I stand for is going to be well known. But I have no argument with anyone making up her mind about who to support. I just hope that by the end of this campaign, there'll be a lot more supporting me. That's what I'm working toward.
As you know, just quickly, as you know, your strong supporter, former Secretary of State Madeline Albright, said the other day that there's a special place in hell for women who don't support other women. Do you agree with what she said?
Well, look, I think that she's been saying that for as long as I've known her, which is about 25 years. But it doesn't change my view that we need to empower everyone, women and men, to make the best decisions in their minds that they can make. That's what I've always stood for. And when it comes to the issues that are really on the front lines as to whether we're going to have equal pay, paid family leave, some opportunity for, women to go as far as their hard work and talent take them, I think that we still have some barriers to knock down, which is why that's at the core of my campaign. I would notice, just for a historic aside, somebody told me earlier today we've had like 200 presidential primary debates, and this is the first time there have been a majority of women on the stage. So, we'll take our progress wherever we can find it.
So that's Hillary Clinton's answer to why she lost the women's vote in New Hampshire, and she's hoping to gain the women's vote. It's kind of weird that the person running to be the first woman president can't get the majority of the women's vote in the Democratic Party. And over on the other side, Bernie Sanders, I'm going to show the continuation of that clip where first they point out to Bernie Sanders, because the two moderators, Gwen Ifill and Judy Woodruff, are women, and Hillary Clinton's a woman, that he's outnumbered on the stage, like Hillary Clinton said there. But then ask him how he feels about the possibility of being the one to stop the first woman president, which is kind of a strange question. But he, I think, answers it pretty well, saying that his election would also be historic. And then there's a back and forth between Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders about this issue. And then Bernie Sanders actually, at the end, I think makes it, goes into a better topic where he kind of switches it around on the Republicans and talks about Republican hypocrisy over in this clip.
Senator Sanders, you're in the minority, but we still want to hear from you.
Look, we are fighting for every vote that we can get from women, from men, straight, gay, African Americans, Latinos, Asian Americans. We are trying to bring America together around an agenda that works for working families and the middle class. I am very proud, if my memory is not correct, I think I am, that I have a lifetime, and I've been in Congress a few years, a lifetime 100% pro-choice voting record. I am very proud that over the years we have had the support in my state of Vermont from very significant majorities of women. I am very proud that I support legislation that is currently in the Congress, got support of almost all progressive Democrats in the House and Senate, which says we will end the absurdity of women today making 79 cents on the dollar compared to men. And we will join the rest of the industrialized world in saying that paid family and medical leave should be a right of all working families.
Senator, do you worry at all that you will be the instrument of thwarting history, as Senator Clinton keeps claiming that she might be the first woman president?
Well, you know, I think from an historical point of view, somebody with my background, somebody with my views, somebody who has spent his entire life taking on the big money interest, I think a Sanders victory would be of some historical accomplishment as well.
You know, I have said many times, you know, I am not asking people to support me because I'm a woman. I'm asking people to support me because I think I'm the most qualified, experienced, and ready person to be the president and the commander-in-chief. And I appreciate greatly Senator Sanders' voting record, and I was very proud to get the endorsement of the Planned Parenthood Action Fund because I've been a leader on these issues. I have gone time and time again to take on the vested interests who would keep women's health care decisions the province of the government instead of women ourselves. I'm very proud that NARAL endorsed me because when it comes to it, we need a leader on women's issues, somebody who, yes, votes right, but much more than that, leads the efforts to protect the hard-fought gains that women have made that, make no mistake about it, are under tremendous attack, not just by the Republican presidential candidates, but by a whole national effort to try to set back women's rights. So I'm asking women, I'm asking men to support me because I'm ready to go into the White House on January 20th, 2017 and get to work on both domestic and foreign policy challenges.
Final comment.
Let me concur with the Secretary. No question, women's rights are under fierce attack all over this country. And I'll tell you something that really galls me. I will not shock anybody to suggest that in politics there is occasionally a little bit of hypocrisy, just a little bit. All over this country, we have Republican candidates for president saying, we hate the government. Government is the enemy. We're going to cut Social Security to help you. We're going to cut Medicare and Medicaid, federal aid to education to help you because the government is so terrible. But by the way, when it comes to a woman having to make a very personal choice, in that case, my Republican colleagues love the government and want the government to make that choice for every woman in America. If that's not hypocrisy, I don't know what hypocrisy is.
Thank you both.
So like I said before, I showed that clip. I like the way Bernie Sanders at the end turned that around to be an attack on Republicans, because what he's doing is he's kind of showing himself as a general election candidate. I don't know, maybe it's his tie in Iowa and his win in New Hampshire, but more and more he is trying to act like a general election candidate, which Hillary Clinton's been doing for a long time. I generally like to focus in on the more contentious clips, and there was not much that was contentious in those clips. I just thought it was an interesting topic on the first woman president thing, which is kind of a strange reason to vote for someone, I think. But in this next clip, there's not much contentious either, but it's on a topic that I think is really important, which is mass incarceration. And, you know, I always have this book right here by Michelle Alexander titled The New Jim Crow, which is about mass incarceration and our racist criminal justice system. And, you know, this debate was held in South Carolina, where if Bernie Sanders is going to build on his victory in New Hampshire, he needs to get a lot better percentage of the African American vote than he's getting in the most recent polls. And it's possible he could build it. And one issue he might be able to build it on is using Black Lives Matter issues to show that he is to the left of Hillary Clinton. And you'll see in this back and forth on mass incarceration that starts with a Facebook question from someone in Wisconsin asking why there are so many incarcerated black males in Wisconsin. I didn't even know that there was that much of a population. Well, I guess there are some urban areas there where you might think they would find people to incarcerate, as described in The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander, that a lot of the mass incarceration problems comes from the change in the economy, where our cities lost all these jobs, and we didn't invest in the cities. Instead, we invested in prisons. And some of that comes up in the answers back and forth here. And I do have a little bit I want to say about Hillary Clinton's past. And I even, if you're interested, put a couple links down in the video description to some dueling articles about whether Hillary Clinton deserves the black vote. One of the articles is by Michelle Alexander, the author of The New Jim Crow, there, saying that Hillary Clinton does not deserve the black vote, even though she doesn't go so far as to endorse Bernie Sanders. But anyway, I will discuss that part of it a little more after you watch that clip over here.
Now to the first of several questions from our partners at Facebook. They were selected from a curated group of people we've been following, of undecided voters. The first comes from Claudia Luz, a 54-year-old woman who works as a program manager at a public affairs cable network in Madison, Wisconsin. And she writes, Wisconsin is #1 in African-American male incarceration, according to a University of Wisconsin study. They found that Wisconsin's incarceration rate for black men, which is at 13%, was nearly double the country's rate. What can we do across the nation to address this? Senator Sanders.
This is one of the great tragedies in our country today. And we can no longer continue to sweep it under the rug. It has to be dealt with. Today, a male African-American baby born today stands a 1 in 4 chance of ending up in jail. That is beyond unspeakable. So what we have to do is do radical reform of a broken criminal justice system. What we have to do is end over-policing in African-American neighborhoods. The reality is that both African-American community and the white community do marijuana at about equal rates. The reality is 4 times as many blacks get arrested for marijuana. Truth is that far more blacks get stopped for traffic violations. The truth is that sentencing for blacks is higher than for whites. We need fundamental police reform. Clearly, when we talk about a criminal justice system, I would hope that we could all agree that we are sick and tired of seeing videos on television of unarmed people, often African Americans, shot by police officers. What we have got to do is make it clear that any police officer who breaks the law will, in fact, be held accountable.
You know, I completely agree with Senator Sanders. The first speech I gave in this campaign back in April was about criminal justice reform and ending the era of mass incarceration. The statistics from Wisconsin are particularly troubling because it is the highest rate of incarceration for African Americans in our nation, twice the national average. And we know of the tragic, terrible event that led to the death of Dontre Hamilton right here in Milwaukee. A young man, unarmed, who should still be with us. His family certainly believes that, and so do I. So we have work to do. There have been some good recommendations about what needs to happen. President Obama's policing commission came out with some. I have fully endorsed those. But we have to restore policing that will actually protect the communities that police officers are sworn to protect. And then we have to go after sentencing. And that's one of the problems here in Wisconsin, because so much of what happens in the criminal justice system doesn't happen at the federal level. It happens at the state and local level. But I would also add this. There are other racial discrepancies, really systemic racism in this state as in others, in education, in employment, in the kinds of factors that too often lead from a position where young people, particularly young men, are pushed out of school early, are denied employment opportunities. So when we talk about criminal justice reform and ending the era of mass incarceration, we also have to talk about jobs, education, housing, and other ways of helping communities do better.
Briefly. Nothing that Secretary Clinton said do I disagree with. This mandatory sentencing, very bad idea, takes away discretion from judges. We have got to demilitarize local police departments so they do not look like occupying armies. We have got to make sure that local police departments look like the communities they serve in their diversity. And where we are failing abysmally is in the very high rate of recidivism we see. People are being released from jail without the education, without the job training, without the resources they need to get their lives together. Then we're shocked that they end up back in jail again. So we have a lot of work to do. But here is a pledge that I've made throughout this campaign, and it's really not a very radical pledge. When we have more people in jail, disproportionately African American and Latino, than China does, a communist authoritarian society 4 times our size, here's my promise. At the end of my first term as president, we will not have more people in jail than any other country. We will invest in education and jobs for our kids, not incarceration and more jails.
So I thought both Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton had good answers to the mass incarceration, racist criminal justice, Black Lives Matter issue that they addressed in their answers there. One of the things I wanted to talk about that I mentioned before, I played the clip, were these dueling articles that I put down in the video description. One from Michelle Alexander, the author of The New Jim Crow right there, saying Hillary Clinton doesn't deserve the black vote, going over the Clinton administration's crime bill, and even, not only is she somewhat responsible for what her husband did, 2 for the price of 1 and all that, but she said some things at the time that were the same kind of rhetoric they were using to advance that crime bill that was somewhat responsible for mass incarceration. There's a quote in that article about her talking about these super predators who have no empathy that we have to, lock up, or I don't have the exact quote, but it's down there in the video description. And then you can contrast that to an article by this Slate writer who I've read several good articles about the criminal justice system from in the last year or so, and about mass incarceration. His name is Leon Nafek, I think is how you pronounce it. And he's basically saying the opposite, that Hillary Clinton that Michelle Alexander's wrong, and Hillary Clinton doesn't deserve to be blamed for, and Bill Clinton don't deserve to be blamed for mass incarceration, that a lot of it happened before they even got there, though that's also detailed in the new Jim Crow, that, going back to the Reagan administration, not to the Clinton administration. And he also talks about how they only affected federal, not state, where a lot of the mass incarceration problems are. And anyway, I thought they're good dueling articles to read if that's an issue that's important to you. It's an issue that's important to me. I want to move on to the next clip, which is one in which Gwen Ifill kind of switches around the whole Black Lives Matter issue question into, she doesn't actually say White Lives Matter, but she asks, first it sounds like she's going to ask Senator Bernie Sanders first, but instead she asks Hillary Clinton first about whether white people have like a reason to be disgruntled and dissatisfied in the United States. And Hillary Clinton kind of says yes, and then Bernie Sanders answers the same question, and he brings it to economic issues, which I think is a better answer, as I will discuss after you watch that clip over here.
Because when we talk about race in this country, we always talk about African Americans, people of color. I want to talk to you about white people, okay?
White people?
I know. So many people would be surprised to find out that we are sitting in one of the most racially polarized metropolitan areas in the country. By the middle of the century, the nation is going to be majority non-white. Our public schools are already there. If working class white Americans are about to be outnumbered, are already underemployed in many cases, and one study found they are dying sooner, don't they have a reason to be resentful, Secretary Clinton?
Look, I am deeply concerned about what's happening in every community in America, and that includes white communities where we are seeing an increase in alcoholism, addiction, earlier deaths. People with a high school education or less are not even living as long as their parents lived. This is a remarkable and horrifying fact. And that's why I've come forward with, for example, a plan to revitalize coal country, the coal field communities that have been so hard hit by the changing economy, by the reduction in the use of coal. Coal miners and their families who helped turn on the lights and power our factories for generations are now wondering, has our country forgotten us? Do people not care about all of our sacrifice? And I'm going to do everything I can to address distressed communities, whether they are communities of color, whether they are white communities, whether they are in any part of our country. I particularly appreciate the proposal that Congressman Jim Clyburn has, the 10-20-30 proposal, to try to spend more federal dollars in communities with persistent generational poverty. And you know what? If you look at the numbers, there are actually as many, if not more, white communities that are truly being left behind and left out. So yes, I do think it would be a terrible oversight not to try to address the very real problems that white Americans, particularly those without a lot of education, whose jobs have no longer provided them or even no longer present in their communities, because we have to focus where the real hurt is. And that's why, as president, I will look at communities that need special help and try to deliver that.
Senator, I want you to respond to that, but I also want you to tell, am I wrong? Is it even right to be describing this as a matter of race?
Yeah, you can, because African Americans and Latinos not only face the general economic crises of low wages and high unemployment and poor educational opportunities, but they face other problems as well. So yes, we can talk about it as a racial issue, but it is a general economic issue. And here's what the economic issue is. The wages that high school graduates receive today are significantly less, whether you're white or black, than they used to be. Why is that? because of a series of disastrous trade policies which have allowed corporate America, through NAFTA and permanent normal trade relations with China. Secretary Clinton and I disagree on those issues. But my view is those trade policies have enabled corporate America to shut down in this country, throw millions of people out on the street. Now, no one thinks that working in a factory is the greatest job in the world. But you know what? You can make a middle-class wage. You have decent health care, decent benefits. You once had a pension. Those jobs, in many cases, are now gone. They're off to China. Now, you are a worker, white worker, black worker, who had a decent job. That manufacturing job has got, what do you got now? You're working at McDonald's? That is why there is massive despair all over this country. People have worked their entire lives. They're making a half, two-thirds what they used to make. Their kids are having a hard time finding any work at all. And that's why this study, which shows that if you can believe it today, for white working class people between 45 and 54, life expectancy is actually going down. Suicide, alcoholism, drugs. That's why we need to start paying attention to the needs of working families in this country, and not just a handful of billionaires who have enormous economic and political power.
Thank you.
So I thought that was a better answer by Bernie Sanders, because instead of saying, white people have a right to be resentful, I mean, he did kind of say that also, but he also included this economic argument that reaches out to working class people, even like Trump voters, the, non-college educated white working class people are some of the most likely to support Trump, but could also be brought over with arguments like that from Bernie Sanders. So I like that, and so I included that clip. And at the end there, he also talked about the power of the billionaires, and that the next two clips, there's like about 6 minutes and then about 2.5 minutes. I cut it into two parts just because it was getting too long, and it's on, I have it, the fight about Wall Street, or the Wall Street fight part 1 and part 2 down in the video description, and you can see the different topics briefly explained there. But it starts off with this question about all these millionaires giving, or $1 million contributions going to the SuperPac that supports Hillary Clinton, which she tries to say, that, I can't coordinate with them and they don't have any effect on me. And I mean, to some extent it's true that it's illegal to coordinate, but I have seen articles showing how she courts the donors and tells them to support that super PAC, even though it was started to support Obama, like she says in her answer. And then when Bernie Sanders gets a chance to talk, he basically says, the American people aren't stupid, and it's a corrupt system. He never says Hillary Clinton is corrupt, but this is about 6.5 minutes, and then I'll have a 2.5 minute conclusion after I briefly make another comment, and you watch the clip here.
Secretary Clinton, your campaign has recently ramped up criticism of Senator Sanders for attending Democratic Party fundraisers from which you say he benefited. But nearly half of your financial sector donations appear to come from just two wealthy financiers, George Soros and Donald Sussman, for a total of about $10 million. You have said that there's no quid pro quo involved. But is that also true of the donations that wealthy Republicans give to Republican candidates, contributors including the Koch brothers?
I can't speak for the Koch brothers. You're referring to a super PAC that we don't coordinate with, that was set up to support President Obama, that has now decided they want to support me. They are the ones who should respond to any questions. Let's talk about our campaigns. I'm very proud of the fact that we have more than 750,000 donors, and the vast majority of them are giving small contributions. So I'm proud of Senator Sanders and his supporters. I think it's great that, Senator Sanders, President Obama, and I have more donors than any three people who have ever run, certainly on the Democratic side. That's the way it should be. And I'm going to continue to reach out to thank all my online contributors for everything they are doing for me, to encourage them to help me and do more, just as Senator Sanders is. And I think that is the real key here. We both have a lot of small donors. I think that sets us apart from a lot of what's happening on the Republican side. The Koch brothers have a very clear political agenda. It is an agenda, in my view, that would do great harm to our country. We're going to fight it as hard as we can, and we're going to fight whoever the Republicans nominate, who will be very dependent upon the Koch brothers and others.
Senator, I'm asking if Democratic donors are different from Republican donors.
What we are talking about in reality is a corrupt campaign finance system. That's what we're talking about. And we have to be honest about it. And it is undermining American democracy. When extraordinarily wealthy people make very large contributions to super PACs, and in many cases in this campaign, super PACs have more money, have raised more money than individual candidates have. Okay? We had a decision to make early on. Do we do a super PAC? And we said, no, we don't represent Wall Street. We don't represent the billionaire class, so it ends up I'm the only candidate up here of the many candidates who has no super PAC. But what we did is we said to the working families of this country, look, we know things are tough, but if you want to help us, go beyond establishment politics and establishment economics, send us something. And it turned out that up until this point, and this has blown me away, never in a million years would I have believed that I'd be standing here tonight telling you that we have received 3.5 million individual contributions from well over 1 million people. Now, Secretary Clinton's super PAC, as I understand it, received $25 million last reporting period, $15 million from Wall Street. Our average contribution is $27. I'm very proud of that.
Senator,
Well, let me just respond.
Senator Sanders, are you
We
saying
are mixing apples and oranges. My 750,000 donors have contributed more than $1.5 million donations. I'm very proud. That, I think, between the two of us demonstrates the strength of the support we have among people who want to see change in our country. But the real issue that I think the senator is injecting into this is that if you had a super PAC like President Obama had, which now says it wants to support me, it's not my PAC. If you take donations from Wall Street, you can't be independent. I would just say I debated then Senator Obama numerous times on stages like this. And he was the recipient of the largest number of Wall Street donations of anybody running on the Democratic side ever. Now, when it mattered, he stood up and took on Wall Street. He pushed through and he passed the Dodd-Frank regulations, the toughest regulations since the 1930s. So let's not in any way imply here that either President Obama or myself would in any way not take on any vested interest, whether it's Wall Street or drug companies or insurance companies or, frankly, the gun lobby, to stand up to do what's best for the American people.
Well, let's not insult the intelligence of the American people. People aren't dumb. Why in God's name does Wall Street make huge campaign contributions? I guess just for the fun of it. They want to throw money around. Why does the pharmaceutical industry make huge campaign contributions? Any connection, maybe, to the fact that our people pay the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs? Why does the fossil fuel industry spend huge amounts of money on campaign contributions? Any connection to the fact that not one Republican candidate for president thinks and agrees with the scientific community that climate change is real and that we have got to transform our energy system? And when we talk about Wall Street, let's talk about Wall Street. I voted for Dodd-Frank, got an important amendment in it. My view, it doesn't go anywhere near far enough. But when we talk about Wall Street, you have Wall Street and major banks have paid $200 billion in fines since the great crash. No Wall Street executive has been prosecuted.
All right.
Well, let's just.
Now, when Bernie Sanders at the end says that no Wall Street executive has been prosecuted, what he doesn't really say, but he should maybe say more explicitly if it, it could be a political problem for him, as I'll explain in just a sec, but what he doesn't really say is that it's President Obama's Justice Department that decided not to prosecute any of those Wall Street executives. In fact, right next to The New Jim Crow, this is a book by Matt Taibbi from Rolling Stone magazine called The Divide. I actually saw Matt Taibbi about a week ago speak at UC Davis, and he about 80% of what he said was in that what he wrote in that book, which is basically about the two different systems of criminal justice, one for the very rich and one for the very poor. The very poor is kind of like what Michelle Alexander talks about in The New Jim Crow, but for the very rich, he talks about how Eric Holder especially is behind the decision not to prosecute any of these Wall Street people to avoid the collateral consequences to the economy, and they just get a much more sympathetic look from the criminal justice system than people at the very bottom do. No big surprise, I guess. So I wish Bernie Sanders had gone a little more after President Obama, because you saw in that last answer, Hillary Clinton defended herself with President Obama saying, if you're saying that taking Wall Street money means that you don't go after the big banks, what about Barack Obama passing going for Dodd-Frank, even though he took all this money from Wall Street? And the thing is, he didn't really go after the bankers as strongly as he could have, or his Justice Department and Eric Holder didn't anyway. And then, like I said, I want to show the last 2.5 minutes here where I think you hear Hillary Clinton starts using more of the Bernie Sanders type rhetoric, no banks are too big to fail, no banks are too big to jail. And here I think, even though their substance is different, they kind of match up on the rhetoric a little more. I still think that Bernie Sanders wins this round, or the conclusion of the Wall Street argument, for about 2.5 minutes here.
Follow up on this because, I've made it very clear that no bank is too big to fail, no executive too powerful to jail, and because of Dodd-Frank, we now have in law a process that the president, the Federal Reserve, and others can use if any bank poses a systemic risk. I think that's a major accomplishment. I agree, however, it doesn't go far enough, because what it focuses on are the big banks, which Senator Sanders has talked about a lot for good reason. I go further in the plan that I've proposed, which has been called the toughest, most effective, comprehensive plan for reining in the other risks that the financial system could face. It was an investment bank, Lehman Brothers, that contributed to our collapse. It was a big insurance company, AIG. It was Countrywide Mortgage. My plan would sweep all of them into a regulatory framework so we can try to get ahead of what the next problems might be. And I believe that not only Barney Frank, Paul Krugman, and others have said that what I have proposed is the most effective. It goes in the right direction. We have Dodd-Frank. We can use it to break up the banks if that's appropriate. But let's not kid ourselves. As we speak, there are new problems on the horizon. I want to get ahead of those, and that's why I've proposed a much more comprehensive approach to deal with all of
We have to go to a break.
Yes.
Let me, again, respectfully disagree with Secretary Clinton here. When you have 3 out of the 4 largest financial institutions in this country bigger today than they were when we bailed them out because they were too big to fail, when you have 6 financial institutions having assets equivalent to 58% of the GDP of America, issuing 2/3 of the credit cards and 1/3 of the mortgages. Look, I think if Teddy Roosevelt were alive today, that great trust buster would have said, break them up. I think he would have been right. I think he would have said, bring back a 21st century Glass Steagall legislation. I think that would have been right as well. That's my view.
Thank you both. It is.
So, yeah, hope that you enjoyed the 2 clips. I split the Wall Street argument. I think that's pretty much the entire Wall Street argument between Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton there. And by the way, when I was watching, or while we were watching the clips together, I also was reading your comments. I saw this one from Jonathan Yeshi about the new Jim Crow. Here's the... And am I trying to sell the new Jim Crow here? These books that I have turned towards the camera are the last 7 or 8 nonfiction books that I've read and that I think are worth reading. The new Jim Crow is kind of, in some ways, like the Bible of the Black Lives Matter movement. I mean, Michelle Alexander has put in a lot of intellectual heft behind the arguments about the racist criminal justice system. It's a really important book if you are interested in Black Lives Matter, and it's a movement that I'm really interested in because I used to be a public defender. I worked in the criminal justice system, first in St. Louis, Missouri, where that whole, the whole Ferguson, Missouri was part of St. Louis County, and the prosecutor for St. Louis County, Missouri, Bob McCullough, was the prosecutor when I was there, like 20 years ago, or 15, I don't know how. Don't even ask me how long ago it was. But so I'm really interested in Black Lives Matter. And if you want to understand Black Lives Matter, you got to read the new Jim Crow. I don't get any, it's not like product placement. No one's paying me to sell it. I just put these books up there because I think they're important books. And a lot of times I'll refer to other books, but for Black Lives Matter and the criminal justice system, these 2, that's why I always keep them there, because they are 2 really important books for understanding the criminal justice system and the divide in the criminal justice system and the racism in the criminal justice system. So I hope that answers that question. But now I want to move on to some foreign policy clips. I think, 3 foreign policy clips where I think Bernie Sanders has developed some somewhat better arguments where he's showing how he's to the left of Hillary Clinton. She's more hawkish, more interventionist, more for regime change. And he takes it beyond just the vote on the Iraq War. He also talks about intervention in Libya. And Hillary Clinton has sort of developed some new attacks as well, which start off, this is the first of the 3 foreign policy clips, where first Bernie Sanders talks about Iraq and Libya, and Hillary Clinton says, a vote against the Iraq War in 2002 is not a plan to defeat ISIS. And anyway, I'll discuss a little more if you watch that clip here.
Let me just say this. What a president of the United States has got to do, and what is his or her major, I think, responsibility, is to, A, make certain that we keep our people safe, that we work with allies around the world to protect democratic values, that we do all that we can to create a world of peace and prosperity. I voted against the war in Iraq because I listened very carefully to what President Bush and Vice President Cheney had to say, and I didn't believe them. And if you go to my website, berniesanders.com, what you find is not only that I helped lead the opposition to that war, but much of what I feared would happen, what I spoke on the floor of the House, in fact, did happen in terms of the instability that occurred. Now, I think an area in kind of a vague way, or not so vague, where Secretary Clinton and I disagree, is the area of regime change. Look, the truth is that a powerful nation like the United States, certainly working with our allies, we can overthrow dictators all over the world. And God only knows Saddam Hussein was a brutal dictator. We could overthrow Assad tomorrow if we wanted to. We got rid of Gaddafi. But the point about foreign policy is not just to know that you can overthrow a terrible dictator. It's to understand what happens the day after. And in Libya, for example, the United States, Secretary Clinton, as Secretary of State, working with some other countries, did get rid of a terrible dictator named Gaddafi. But what happened is a political vacuum developed. ISIS came in and now occupies significant territory in Libya. and is now prepared, unless we stop them, to have a terrorist foothold. But this is nothing new. This has gone on 50 or 60 years, where the United States has been involved in overthrowing governments. Mossadegh back in 1953. Nobody knows who Mossadegh was. Democratically elected Prime Minister of Iran. He was overthrown by British and American interest because he threatened oil interest of the British. And as a result of that, the Shah of Iran came in, terrible dictator. As a result of that, you had the Iranian Revolution coming in, and that's where we are today. Unintended consequences. So I believe, as president, I will look very carefully about unintended consequences. I will do everything I can to make certain that the United States and our brave men and women in the military do not get bogged down in perpetual warfare in the Middle East.
If I could just respond. Two points. One, Senator Sanders voted in 1998 on what I think is fair to call a regime change resolution with respect to Iraq, calling for the end of Saddam Hussein's regime. He voted in favor of regime change with Libya, voted in favor of the Security Council being an active participant in setting the parameters for what we would do, which, of course, we followed through on. I do not believe a vote in 2002 is a plan to defeat ISIS in 2016. It's very important we focus on the threats we face today and that we understand the complicated and dangerous world we're in. When people go to vote in primaries or caucuses, they are voting not only for the president, they are voting for the commander-in-chief. And it's important that people really look hard at what the threats and dangers we face are and who is best prepared for dealing with them. As we all remember, Senator Obama, when he ran against me, was against the war in Iraq. And yet, when he won, he turned to me, trusting my judgment, my experience, to become Secretary of State. I was very honored to be asked to do that and very honored to serve with him those first 4 years.
Judy, if I
So I'm going to get to the continuation of the clip in just a sec, but I thought that was another example of Hillary Clinton using President Obama as a shield and trying to hug the Obama presidency as close as possible. That is really important, I think, in the upcoming South Carolina presidency, presidential primary, because the Democratic primary voters in South Carolina are much more African American. The demographic is a lot higher in South Carolina than in Iowa and New Hampshire, and that's where Bernie Sanders is really lagging behind Hillary Clinton. And so if Hillary Clinton can paint Bernie Sanders as anti-Obama, that's going to turn off African American voters and stop him from gaining momentum from New Hampshire into Nevada and South Carolina. I think Nevada is on, the Nevada primary is on November 20th, where there are actually more Latino voters than in the previous states. And then I think February 27th, if I have that right, a week later, is the South Carolina primary for Democrats. So I think that's what that was about. And in this next clip, Bernie Sanders has this huge zinger for Hillary Clinton prepared on her closeness to Henry Kissinger, which I think made some news. You may have already seen that. And I don't know why he saves it for right where he did. It seems like he should be using it after getting that zinger against him about, a vote against the Iraq War in 2002 isn't a plan to defeat ISIS. But he first goes into his regular talking point about judgment versus experience. Hillary Clinton has experience, but he has judgment. And he not only talks about the Iraq War vote, but he talks about regime change more generally. And then Hillary Clinton does this weird thing where she tries to take responsibility for the strike that killed bin Laden, or at least for giving a recommendation to go ahead. And that's when Bernie Sanders pulls out his Henry Kissinger zinger for some reason over in this clip.
If I can, there is no question, and Secretary Clinton and I are friends, and I have a lot of respect for her, that she has enormous experience in foreign affairs. Secretary of State for 4 years. You got a bit of experience, I would imagine. But judgment matters as well. Judgment matters as well. And she and I looked at the same evidence coming from the Bush administration regarding Iraq. I led the opposition against it. She voted for it. But more importantly, in terms of this Libya resolution that you've noted before, this was a virtually unanimous consent. Everybody voted for it, wanting to see Libya move toward democracy. Of course, we all wanted to do that. That is very different than talking about specific action for regime change, which I did not support.
You did support a UN Security Council approach, which we did follow up on. And look, I think it's important to look at what the most important counterterrorism judgment of the first 4 years of the Obama administration was, and that was the very difficult decision as to whether or not to advise the president to go after bin Laden. I looked at the evidence. I looked at the intelligence. I got the briefings. I recommended that the president go forward. It was a hard choice. Not all of his top national security advisors agreed with that. And at the end of the day, it was the president's decision. So he had to leave the Situation Room after hearing from the small group advising him, and he had to make that decision. I'm proud that I gave him that advice, and I'm very grateful to the brave Navy SEALs who carried out that mission.
Judy?
Yeah.
One area, very
Just
briefly,
the final word.
where the Secretary and I have a very profound difference. In the last debate, and I believe in her book, very good book, by the way, in her book and in this last debate, she talked about getting the approval or the support or the mentoring of Henry Kissinger. Now, I find it rather amazing because I happen to believe that Henry Kissinger was one of the most destructive secretaries of state in the modern history of this country. I am proud to say that Henry Kissinger is not my friend. I will not take advice from Henry Kissinger. And in fact, Kissinger's actions in Cambodia, when the United States bombed that country, overthrew Prince Sihanouk, created the instability for Pol Pot and the Khmer Rouge to come in, who then butchered some 3 million innocent people, one of the worst genocides in the history of the world. So count me in as somebody who will not be listening to Henry Kissinger.
Secretary Clinton.
Well, I know journalists have asked who you do listen to on foreign policy, and we have yet to know who that is.
Well, it ain't Henry Kissinger, that's for sure.
That's fine. You know, I listen to a wide variety of voices that have expertise in various areas. I think it is fair to say, whatever the complaints that you want to make about him are, that with respect to China, one of the most challenging relationships we have, his opening up China and his ongoing relationships with the leaders of China is an incredibly useful relationship for the United States of America. So if we want to pick and choose, and I certainly do, people I listen to, people I don't listen to, people I listen to for certain areas, then I think we have to be fair and look at the entire world, because it's a big, complicated world out there.
It is.
And yes, people we may disagree with on a number of things may have some insight, may have some relationships that are important for the president to understand in order to best protect the United States.
I find it, I mean, it's just a very different, historical perspective here. Kissinger was one of those people during the Vietnam era who talked about the domino theory. Not everybody remembers that. You do, I do. The domino theory. You know, if Vietnam goes, China, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. That's what he talked about. The great threat of China. And then after the war, this is the guy who, in fact, yes, you're right, he opened up relations with China and now pushed various type of trade agreements, resulting in American workers losing their jobs as corporations move to China, the terrible authoritarian communist dictatorship he warned us about. Now he's urging American companies to shut down and move to China. Not my kind of guy.
Senator, let me move on to another country.
So you can let me know what you think down in the comment section, but I think Senator Bernie Sanders won the Kissinger round, and I don't know, there are going to be more debates. Maybe there'll be some sort of Kissinger rebuttal that Hillary Clinton comes up with, but A lot of people on the left think that Henry Kissinger is a war criminal, for those who do remember those times. And even just in the last year or two, I think when Henry Kissinger testified to some congressional committee, he was attacked by someone from Code Pink who tried to do like a symbolic citizen's arrest of him as a war criminal. So it is a real issue on the left. I think I may have even made a video about it. It was in the last year or two. But I want to move on to the last clip on foreign policy, where it starts off with a question. I don't actually show the question, but about the latest news that John Kerry has made progress in negotiating some kind of ceasefire in Syria. And you'll see Hillary Clinton starts off taking some credit for that based on work she did back in 2012. And she also attacks Bernie Sanders for not really understanding the Middle East because he wants Iran to go send troops into Syria, and he doesn't understand the enmity between Iran and Saudi Arabia. And I think Bernie Sanders has a fairly good response to that. It's kind of the switcheroo on what Hillary Clinton's been doing. He kind of hides behind President Obama, but it's candidate Obama in 2008 and the way he wanted to talk to our adversaries, and he turns it into a conversation about that. And I'll talk about that a little more after you see that clip. Over here.
It's working extremely hard to try to move that ceasefire up as quickly as possible. But I would add this, the Security Council finally got around to adopting a resolution. At the core of that resolution is an agreement I negotiated in June of 2012 in Geneva, which set forth a ceasefire and moving toward a political resolution, trying to bring the parties at stake in Syria together. This is incredibly complicated because we've got Iran as a big player. In addition to Russia, we have Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and others who have very important interests in their view. This is one of the areas I've disagreed with Senator Sanders on, who has called for Iranian troops trying to end the civil war in Syria, which I think would be a grave mistake. Putting Iranian troops right on the border of the Golan, right next to Israel, would be a non-starter for me. Trying to get Iran and Saudi Arabia to work together, as he has suggested in the past, is equally a non-starter. So let's support what Secretary Kerry and the President are doing, but let's hope that we can accelerate the ceasefire, because I fear that the Russians will continue their bombing, try to do everything they can to destroy what's left of the opposition. And remember, the Russians have not gone after ISIS or any of the other terrorist groups. So as we get a ceasefire and maybe some humanitarian corridors, that still leaves the terrorist groups on the doorstep of others in Syria, Turkey, Lebanon, Jordan, and the like. So we've got some real work to do, and let's try to make sure we actually implement what has been agreed to with the Russians.
Let me just say this. For a start, the Secretary and I disagree, and I think the President does not agree with her, in terms of the concept of a no-fly zone in Syria. I think you do have a humanitarian tragedy there, as I mentioned a moment ago. I applaud Secretary Kerry and the President for trying to put together this agreement. Let's hope that it holds. But furthermore, what we have got to do, I'm sorry, yeah, I do believe that we have got to do everything that we can, and it will not happen tomorrow. But I do hope that in years to come, just as occurred with Cuba, 10, 20 years ago, people say, reach normalized relations with Cuba. And by the way, I hope we can end the trade embargo with Cuba as well. But the idea that we someday maybe have decent relations with Iran, maybe put pressure on them so they end their support for terrorism around the world, yeah, that is something I want to achieve. And I believe that the best way to do that is to be aggressive, to be principled, but to have the goal of trying to improve relations. That's how you make peace in the world. You sit down and you work with people. You make demands of people. In this case, demanding Iran stop the support of international terrorism.
Well, I respectfully disagree. I think we have achieved a great deal with the Iranian nuclear agreement to put a lid on the Iranian nuclear weapons program. That has to be enforced absolutely with consequences for Iran at the slightest deviation from their requirements under the agreement. I do not think we should promise or even look toward normalizing relations because we have a lot of other business to get done with Iran. Yes, they have to stop being the main state sponsor of terrorism. Yes, they have to stop trying to destabilize the Middle East, causing even more chaos. Yes, they've got to get out of Syria. They've got to quit sponsoring Hezbollah and Hamas. They've got to quit trying to ship rockets into Gaza that can be used against Israel. We have a lot of work to do with Iran before we ever say that they could move toward normalized relations with us.
We have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work to do. But I recall when Secretary Clinton ran against then Senator Obama. She was critical of him for suggesting that maybe you want to talk to Iran, that you want to talk to our enemies. I have no illusion. Of course you're right. Iran is sponsoring terrorism in many parts of the world, destabilizing areas. Everybody knows that. But our goal is, in fact, to try over a period of time to, in fact, deal with our enemies, not just ignore that
But
reality.
if you're going to quote me, Senator Sanders, from a debate in 2008, quote what I said. The question was, would you meet with an adversary without conditions? I said no. And in fact, in the Obama administration, we did not meet with anybody without conditions. That is the appropriate approach in order to get the results that you are seeking.
No, I think the idea was that then Senator Obama was wrong for suggesting that it's a good idea to talk to your opponents. It's easy to talk to your friends. It's harder to talk to your enemies. I think we should do both.
Let me move on. You have both men.
So like I said before I showed that clip, I thought it was interesting that was kind of a switcheroo where Bernie Sanders was hugging President Obama, or at least candidate Obama from 2008, while Hillary Clinton was put in the position of disagreeing with President Obama, which will be the opposite in the next clip I'm going to show. Although first I want to say about those foreign policy clips, I thought Bernie Sanders pretty much got it to like a draw with Hillary Clinton. I've been somewhat critical of his foreign policy clips in previous debates, even though, like I said before I showed the foreign policy clips, I think Bernie Sanders' position is the better position. He's less interventionist, less hawkish, less for regime change, but he hasn't really been articulating it that well in past debates, mostly sticking to the Iraq war vote and, saying that's judgment compared to experience. And in this debate, I think that he expanded on that, added in Libya and the idea of regime change in general. And then that Kissinger zinger kind of builds on that debate as well. So I thought Bernie Sanders did a much better job on foreign policy. And even though it was kind of a draw, that the fact that his foreign policy arguments are coming up in a draw with former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, who are always well prepared on these issues and has like the best spin to put on the facts that she is willing to include in her arguments. And now I want to move on to the last clip for the broadcast. And like I said, this is a switch back to the question of whether Bernie Sanders is anti-Obama or not. And this is pretty clearly a calculation by Hillary Clinton to put this little argument at the very end of the debate. She runs out the clock, so much so that Bernie Sanders has to use a little bit of his concluding statement to answer the last charge. And so I think Hillary Clinton has saved the worst bits right for the end of the debate, which makes me think she wants this to be her closing argument to the people of South Carolina. Mostly, like I said, those African Americans who really like President Obama and who she wants to stop from looking at Bernie Sanders in terms of his record and all these Black Lives Matter issues, and wants to say, he's anti-Obama, and so you need to support Hillary Clinton as the heir to the Obama administration. That's why I think Hillary Clinton put this here, especially because it's an answer to a question that I'm not going to show. It's one of those Facebook questions that first Bernie Sanders answered about what U.S. leader in history and what foreign leader in history do you find inspirational in terms of how you approach foreign policy, which is kind of a strange question. And Bernie Sanders picked FDR in the United States and then Winston Churchill, though for FDR he didn't really talk about his foreign policy that much. And then Hillary Clinton started her answer by saying she also really liked FDR, and she also mentioned Nelson Mandela. And then you'll see she pulls out this total switch into a different topic about, leadership, pulling out what is her closing argument, her biggest concern to lower Bernie Sanders' numbers in South Carolina at the very end of the debate in this clip.
On something having to do with leadership, because, today Senator Sanders said that President Obama failed the presidential leadership test. And this is not the first time that he has criticized President Obama. In the past, he's called him weak. He's called him a disappointment. He wrote a foreword for a book that basically argued voters should have buyer's remorse when it comes to President Obama's leadership and legacy. And I just couldn't disagree more with those kinds of comments. From my perspective, maybe because I understand what President Obama inherited, not only the worst financial crisis, but the antipathy of the Republicans in Congress. I don't think he gets the credit he deserves for being a president who got us out of that ditch, put us on firm ground, and has sent us into the future. And it is the kind of criticism that we've heard from Senator Sanders about our president, I expect from Republicans. I do not expect from someone running for the Democratic nomination to succeed President Obama.
Madam Secretary, that is a low blow. I have worked with President Obama for the last 7 years. When President Obama came into office, we were losing 800,000 jobs a month, 800,000 jobs a month. We had a $1.4 trillion deficit, and the world's financial system was on the verge of collapse. As a result of his efforts and the efforts of Joe Biden against unprecedented, I was there in the Senate, unprecedented Republican obstructionism, we have made enormous progress. But you know what? Last I heard, we lived in a democratic society. Last I heard, a United States senator had the right to disagree with the president, including a president who has done such an extraordinary job. So I have voiced criticisms. You're right, maybe you haven't. I have. But I think to suggest that I have voiced criticism, this blurb that you talk about, you know what the blurb said? Blurb said that the next president of the United States has got to be aggressive in bringing people in to the political process. That's what I said. That is what I believe. President Obama and I are friends. As you know, he came to Vermont to campaign for me when he was a senator. I have worked for his reelection, his first election, and his reelection. But I think it is really unfair to suggest that I have not been supportive of the president. I have been a strong ally with him on virtually every issue. Do senators have the right to disagree with the president? Have you ever disagreed with a president?
Senator,
I suspect you may
Senator,
have.
what I am concerned about is not disagreement on issues, saying that this is what I'd rather do. I don't agree with the president on that. Calling the president weak, calling him a disappointment, calling several times that he should have a primary opponent when he ran for re-election in 2012. I think that goes further than saying we have our disagreements. As a senator, yes, I was a senator. I understand we can disagree on the path forward, but those kinds of personal assessments and charges are ones that I find
Senator,
particularly
if you'd like to
troubling.
you may respond to that, but it's time now for closing statements, and you can use your time for closing statements to do that.
One of us ran against Barack Obama. I was not that candidate. All right. Look, this has been a great debate.
I thought it was a pretty good debate, and I talked before I showed that clip about why I thought Hillary Clinton saved it for the end there and is trying to influence those South Carolina voters who really like President Obama. But I thought Bernie Sanders did a pretty effective job of rebutting what Hillary Clinton said there. I thought that even though he had to use a slight little bit of his closing argument, he had to think on his feet when the debate ended there, and I thought he chose a one-liner that was pretty effective at reiterating the arguments he'd made like a minute or two before, and also leaving Hillary Clinton on the defensive because she's attacking Bernie Sanders for not being nice to President Obama, or taking stands against President Obama. But if you think back to the 2008 election, there was a lot of animosity between Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama, and probably people remember that from South Carolina in 2008, or maybe some of them do. We'll see whether Bernie Sanders can gain momentum and build on his win in New Hampshire to actually have a shot at the nomination by going beyond his demographic base to some of those African American voters in South Carolina on February 27th, and the Latino voters in Nevada. Not just those voters, but all voters, but including those stronger demographics in the later Democratic primaries. It'll be interesting to see. I will be back on Sunday, probably a little bit on the earlier side, maybe 4 p.m. Pacific time, which is Greenwich Mean Time minus 8 hours, because I actually have tickets to see Bill Maher live performing here in Sacramento on Sunday night. So I have to finish the show in order to be able to go and see that. If you appreciate these debate clip roundups and the Sunday clip roundups, you can support me on Patreon. I have a link down in the video description. Right now, my video from last Sunday, not monetized because of this bogus copyright claim from this Mexican news parody station called El Pulso US, where they used the same Republican debate clip in their video that I used in my video, but because they're a YouTube partner with Content ID tools that I don't have access to, they can claim that my video, they even tried to monetize my video, and then I disputed it, so now for 30 days I can't monetize my video. No one gets to monetize it. So if you want to help me keep making videos despite these kinds of things that happen every week or so, you can become one of my patrons. I think I have $420 a month right now is my summary of my Patreon donations. So you can become one of my 60-plus patrons who do that every month. I really appreciate that. Or up here in the corner here, if you click on a little eye, you'll see there you can give me direct funding through YouTube fan funding. I appreciate people who do that. I appreciate people who join me live and just comment, or comment on the recorded show, give me a thumbs up, or share the video. All those things help me keep going, and I want to keep bringing you these debate clip roundups and showing you what I think is important in the political campaign, and also covering what the corporate media seems to think is important. And then I get to see down in the comment section what you think is important, and I find that very informative myself. So thanks for joining me, and until my next live stream on Sunday, I guess I'll be seeing all of you around the internet.